And if you're a good guy, you're going to say and do these certain things. You're going to try to emulate a Patagonia or what have you on environmental issues. You're going to emulate some other brand on social issues. Brands become an output of sort of moral, political, whatever you want to call it, convictions of the internal stakeholders versus an objective reflection of the brand's personality. I'm not here to judge any of that. I'm just saying one is brand building and one isn't.
Welcome to the Backcountry Marketing Podcast. Today I'm sitting down with Michael Minter. He is the Vice President of Brand at Sorel. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining. How are you doing?
Good. Really good.
I'm excited to have you on the show and dive into some topics today. We're going to be talking about Sorel. Well, Sorel is going through a bit of a rebrand right now. We're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about a few various subtopics. This idea of insight versus instinct, balancing performance and brand, building an emotional currency with your brand, and then creative content, and how you think about all of that in the context of this rebrand. So I'd love if you could kind of give us a quick introduction to your role and then share with us kind of what you want to share with us about this rebrand.
Sure. Well, my role technically, as you said, is I'm the vice president of brand. For me, the vast majority of that is overseeing the marketing function for Sorel, which, is everything from consumer marketing, channel marketing, all in-house creative. We're building a fully capable in-house creative team. And but I actually spend probably almost majority of my time working closely with the product team on framing out merchandising stories, seasonal strategies, product positioning, design DNA, so that this holistic brand experience is seamless across product marketing and even our brand experience at retail. I spend a lot of time with the direct to consumer team, the sales teams. So my position's somewhat unique, and that's worked out pretty well.
Sorel has had quite the history as a company and it's going through its next chapter of evolution. What
Mhm.
can you share about this next change, this next wave of change?
Well, we just to maybe fully understand that, you have to have a little bit of a backstory. So, certainly for listeners that aren't familiar with the brand, Sorel was a brand born really out of utility in Canada, like so many great brands are born out of utility. In 1962, it was actually a boot that was the byproduct of the Kaufman Rubber Company that had been around. And so we debate on how to frame our history, had been around for decades prior to that, but created this winter boot using materials just found in the local factory solutions. So they had rubber, leather, felt, this sort of what we now think of as sort of this holy trinity of our brand DNA. And the brand for the next 40 years really became a household, particularly in Canada, but certainly in all of North America, the kind of the gold standard for winter boots and footwear. And then it found its way, for a variety of reasons, some of which I'm still learning, found its way to near bankruptcy. And in around 2000, and Columbia Sportswear uh, purchased it, really basically purchasing the IP. But the brand found its way from, sort of traditional outdoor onto the shelves at Bergdorf Goodman. So it's a very interesting history. And so where we find ourselves now is charting the path forward for the brand's sort of next chapter.
And in terms of context for the timeline, where are you at in this rebrand? When does it all come live?
So we've spent the better part of this past year working through, the initial positioning work, rebuilding out our whole brand platform, reframing our target consumer mapping, distribution segmentation, all this hard work that's happened behind the scenes. To be honest with you, a lot of that happened fairly quickly and instinctively, frankly, in the first few weeks of my time at Sorel. What's taken the most time is getting everyone in a cross matrix organization aligned, believing, excited, and starting to manifest that strategy into plans and products that will come to life this fall. So this September will be the first sort of moment where where we see this, for lack of a better description, Sorel 3.0, if you will, kind of lift into the world. And that will, well, and run indefinitely, but certainly the big push here will be a a pulsing of stories and campaigns and content and energy partnerships, really from September through um, or into the spring, and then we'll take a little bit of a breather and then hit it again hard next fall and into the spring again.
What was the reason for the rebrand?
Well, the brand, when COVID hit, the brand really found itself on its back foot. It had an over reliance on some home run products that had become long in the tooth. The brand had, and I wasn't there, so I certainly don't mean to speak ill of any previous leadership, or but my general understanding of it is, there was some real misalignment between product, between marketing, between sales. The brand had built an over reliance on more value distribution, the sort of dumbing down of DNA. It had ignored global distribution almost entirely. It had ignored the men's market entirely. It was taboo to even show snow or winter heritage in the marketing. Again, I can't speak to the rationale of previous leadership, but the brand found its way on its back foot, both culturally and in terms of the business, and had tried some kind of Hail Mary pivots into athleisure and some other things. And so where Corey and I came into the brand, we really found a kind of uncut gem, if you will, that was just had all the makings to be just a tremendous brand, but had kind of lost its way.
So you've got this kind of two polar opposites. You've got this deep winter heritage, and then you've got this more fashion forward, recent history. Where do you go? How do you go forward between those two extremes?
Well, the truth is, and certainly we didn't invent this playbook, and if you look at a brand, obviously in a little more rarefied air positioning wise than a brand like Sorel, but there's actually quite a few correlations. If you look at kind of a case study like Montclair, where, founded actually right around the same time as Sorel, became, founded out of utility, sleeping bags, that sort of thing, created, puffer jackets and some ubiquity that way, found its way to bankruptcy, was purchased in the early 2000s. And the playbook of really leaning into, uh, you know, elevating every single thing you do, looking for validating partnerships and collaborations, applying strict discipline to the way you image the brand, taking even your most mundane and accessible products and treating them like Ferraris. We are where we're finding ourselves is a similar position, is to say, hey, look, there's a playbook we know and believe in and that we've done before. We want to use that thinking with Sorel, but taking advantage of this very opportune cocktail that is really meaningful heritage, undeniable iconic product, but also this proven permission and awareness and equity we have on the fashion side and the lifestyle side, and go, hey, let's merge those, plus in terms of a positioning exercise, and then apply that to a playbook that we know quite well, and sprinkle a little new thinking and innovation into that, and you've got yourself a pretty cool and compelling roadmap.
Interesting. I'm excited to see what that looks like once it all rolls out. As you,
Me too.
I'm curious though. So, is there risk that you've lost a lot of trust with the consumers and the audiences out there? And are you having to rebuild a lot of that trust just based on some of the sporadicness of the history of the brand? How much is that a concern? Is that something you're thinking about, or is that a non-factor?
It's almost a non-factor. I'm sure there's a handful of people out there, and I have no hard study on this, that maybe had purchased products in the recent couple years that were maybe not true to Sorel's promise on quality and design, and maybe have some disappointment. But that's a more of a recent phenomenon. The truth is that the things that Sorel is best known for have almost remained unchanged for 60 years. And so we have this very uh this beloved status with most of our core audience, whether it's people that remember Sorels from the early days of snowboarding, or whether it's people that have been passed down their Sorels from their dad or even grandfather. There is a nostalgia, there's a love affair, there's a trust. I was just recently in Aspen, Colorado, and I had the privilege of hanging out in the cabin of the Aspen Ski Patrol for a little while, just chatting with the guys there, the team there, men and women. And I saw a pair of old Sorels sitting above the fireplace, and he said, "Oh, you're with Sorel," and we were chatting, and they said, "Oh, you got to see our closet," and they opened up this closet that was just chock full of old Sorel caribou boots, and they had names written on them, and these things have, and I said, "Oh, are these everyone's boots here?" He goes, "Some of these are guys have passed away. We've these boots have been here for 30 years." And they were showing me photos of life-saving missions in these boots, and it was just like, wow, this is a whole different thing. So to answer your question in a kind of long-winded way, no, these guys, they were, in fact, when we offered to send them all new boots, they were excited, but you also could tell there was a sort of be careful what you wish for thing, because these are cherished and they've been here all along. Do we really want the new batch that they're sending us? So it's I don't know. Sorry for the long answer, but it's yeah, super cool.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think that that highlights the story and the legacy of them for
Right.
sure. I mean, I found my purse. I think I found my Sorels on eBay. That's where I bought them first. Those old caribou boots.
Totally. And I'm guessing they still hold up.
They do. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, they do. As you think about this concept of homogenization amongst brands in the outdoor and kind of greater outdoor world,
Yeah.
what's your first thought when that word pops up?
Well, I see it beyond the outdoor world. It's funny. I was listening to your podcast with Chris Burkhardt, who I've crossed paths with a couple times in my career. Yes, I was listening to it yesterday on a hike, and he mentioned that too. And I think there's a handful of things that happen there. I mean, the outdoors is innately homogenized to the extent that it's a practical domain, where if you make hiking boots, the creative tends to be showing a person hiking on a hiking trail in hiking boots, right? And so there's an innate literalness to that, right? And it's something we talk a lot about at Sorel, because outside of that homogenization, we are not, yes, we're born from utility. Yes, we make some of the world's best winter boots. But the vast majority of our products and the vast majority of our position is far more romantic than it is literal or practical. And so the brands we look to as examples are things like, if you look at like Ralph Lauren has built one of the most sustainingly relevant brands in history. And he taps into all these amazing romantic domains, the American West, the Ivy League, uh, um, the nautical culture, all these different worlds that all ladder up to sort of this sort of attainable luxury American sportswear position. But the point is he didn't care about selling polo shirts to polo players. So his imaging doesn't become homogenized because he's not constrained by that practical, literal interpretation. A lot of outdoor brands just are, right? Because the nature of their consumer. So in their defense, some of that homogenization is necessary, right? Um, in Sorel's case, we don't feel that constraint, because yes, to some extent, we will show some things relative to their practical usage, but by and large, we're able to sell a broader and bigger dream. And so, now for me, on a more critical level, when I use that word homogenization, beyond sort of that maybe necessary outdoor take, is as I just think brands at large over the last, call it 15 years, have become homogenized for probably two or three main reasons. One being, um, a broader cultural, uh, a broader cultural force, that there are sort of good guys and bad guys, And if you're a good guy, you're going to say and do these certain things. You're going to be, as you know, particularly in the outdoor world, you're going to try to emulate a Patagonia or what have you on environmental issues. You're going to emulate some other brand on social issues. And it becomes this sort of internal, you know, brands become an output of the sort of moral, political, whatever you want to call it, convictions of the internal stakeholders versus an objective reflection of the brand's personality. And I'm not here to judge any of that. I'm just saying one is brand building and one isn't. And I'm dead set in the brand building camp. And so that's one piece of homogenization. The other I would say is just that, you've got marketing departments that, actually Chris touched on this yesterday, that are increasingly, and I think for good reason, distancing themselves from big agencies and trying to be as efficient and nimble as they can inside. What happens is, you know, you have it's a tough thing to talk about without sounding arrogant because or unself-aware. But what you have is a lot of marketing executives who are not, the best analogy I can think of is it's one thing to be the Beatles. It's another thing to be a studio musician that can emulate the Beatles. And it's another thing to be a critic who can't do any of it, but can talk about the Beatles, right? And what happens is you build these internal teams, or even with agencies, I see this happen too, that because they because they haven't hired the right people that actually can generate original thoughts and go and just and create the new album from their own instincts and their own vision and their own passion. What happens is they emulate others, right? So they become the studio musician, or they, even worse, become the critic. And so there's a homogenization that happens just by the middling effect of talent limitations, frankly. And again, that sounds arrogant because clearly I'm implying like, oh, I'm part of the, but to be fair, that is the passion, and that is why I got into this business, and it is why I've tried to build teams where I hire less for pedigree and more for passion. And oh, that sounded pretty cool. And it and so when I'm interviewing people, I want to know what poetry they write on the side. I want to know what pictures they take on their vacation. That I want to know what their if they have a passion for, design, how they design their living room. I want to know, you know what I mean? Like I want to hire multidimensional creators that are not emulators and full of shit. And and so that's that. Sorry for the long question, but or long answer. But coming back to the homogenization thing, it's just like that's what I see happen. I mean, that's and I can give you case study after case study of examples of where I've seen that happen. But anyway, sorry for the filibuster.
Fascinating. So this is something that we talk about on the show.
Yeah.
If I asked you to imagine a classic outdoor short film,
Right.
you and I could both agree on at least 50% of what we're going to see.
Totally. It's almost AI now.
Maybe one day.
Yeah.
But it's going to be someone, getting ready to go on a hike. It's going to be someone on a hike with their friends.
Don't forget seeing them lace up their shoes shot.
The goggle shot if you're filming mountain biking.
Zipping the anorak. Yep.
And then it's going to be someone trying to stitch together a story and drawing personal experience and dovetailing that with a beautiful emotional, revelation.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but
nope.
It's everywhere. It's expected. It's the norm. There's nothing new. There's nothing fresh.
Right.
That's a whole nother piece of the equation, is like finding talent who truly have a story versus just, everyone has a story, but not everyone can present a story and really tell you a story.
Right.
So that's one piece of it all that I see. I want to come back to this concept, though, that you're talking about brand building from an objective perspective versus the leadership's perspective. Why can't they be the same thing?
Maybe I want to make sure I understand your question. Brand building from the...
So you were making the distinction between brand building happening from leadership and their moral perspectives versus an objective perspective based on the brand's voice.
Well, I don't think it's just leadership. I mean, it could be your social media person. It could be, I mean, it's across an organization. I'm saying that let's pick a topic like something that's sort of benign, right? The environment or something that maybe, for the most part, Chris Burkhardt talked about this yesterday with I think it was I was at Arc'teryx doing like some repurposing or kind of helping extend the life of products and whatnot. It's a great thing. I've no Yeah, no shade on that. I All I'm saying is that if I was to contrast that with a Sorel, it's not that us doing an initiative like that would be bad. It's not that hey, that's noble. I'm just saying that's not the question I ask internally, is whether we should, that looks good. Should we do that? No, it's sort of like, what would we do? So if you really understand your personality and you really understand the position you're going for, my point is that's a higher authority to serve than the one that is sort of keeping up with the Joneses, whether it's in terms of um, the environment, whether it's in terms of social issues, whether it's in terms of, I don't care. I don't care. What I care about is what's this brand, and maybe there are those things, but what's this brand's obligation to its position? And so I look at a brand that I was privileged to be part of years ago called Sanook, which now sadly is a trivia question and a shell of its former self. And but back when we were in the peak of that brand, which was rooted in irreverence and humor and just over the top silliness, um, my point is that, and maybe that's an extreme example, uh, any sort of like any sort of thinking that would have been sort of the moment or of the trend would have been a direct liability to our smart aleck positioning. And so it's an extreme example, but is to say, no, the highest good we can do to make this brand resonate and mean something and be polarizing. And there's going to be people that hate it, and there's going to be people that love it and get tattoos of it, which happened crazy amount of times, is to say that's the position we're serving. And so a lot of the work we've been doing at Sorel is going, look, I get it if Billy in HR or Susie in accounting is passionate about um, uh, dog rescue. Great, not our position. Like, I get it if Jim in design or Karen in marketing cares deeply about saving children from drowning. Sorry, I sound like such a jerk. My point is what's our position? You know what I mean? And so what you've seen is just this just malaise of, and it's going, man, I just want a sharp point. I just want a sharp point. If I think about iconic brands outside of our space, I think about old Porsche ads. I referenced that a second ago. You think about uh, you know, you look at like a brand right now, like a Liquid Death or some kind of more obvious or cliche example. It's like the reason they resonate is there's a sharp point. I don't know what Liquid Death's stance on dog rescue is. I, you know what I mean? Like, and that's okay. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. Um, but the outdoor industry in particular is just like moths to a flame. It's like, oh, I mean, if Patagonia tomorrow did a dog rescue program, I'm just picking it, I guarantee you 10 other brands would suddenly care deeply about dogs. It's like, I'm not, that's the point I'm trying to make. Sorry if it's clumsy.
Yeah, no, I track what you're saying, and I don't think you're not saying that the result or the impact isn't worthy or good. It's that we tend to look at what other brands are doing and then do the same thing. Um, and
Totally.
we see Yeti put out an amazing film series, and then everyone goes out and produces a very similar
Mhm.
film series. Um, it's hard to be original. It's hard to think outside the box, in part because we're such an insular community. We don't look outside the box very often.
Right.
And when we do, oftentimes that's seen as a risk, and therefore we should avoid that and play it safe, quote unquote. Is that sounds like what you're saying?
Totally. And what I try to do to mitigate that is, and I talked about this literally like my first week at Sorel, and I probably lost some people with how maybe absurd this sounds. But to me, it's like, don't even worry about the rule book for a second. Don't worry about just absolutely obsess on this abstract dream, what it tastes like, smells like, feels like, this abstract dream of what you think this brand could be, and with don't even think about just product, don't even just think about this essence in the distance. And the analogy I give is like, I was actually working this out with my dad, who was a naval officer for many years. It's like if you leave Los Angeles Harbor and your destination is Sydney, Australia, right? And you have a fleet of ships. There's just like an organization, there's going to be detours and pit stops, and one ship might have to get distracted in Hawaii for a minute and whatever, right? But if we all know that's what we're all trying to get to Sydney, Australia, not only does that help make the decisions, so suddenly that detour that would otherwise take you to homogenization is reduced. We just know, like, try to make remember, that's where we're going. Like, that's why we're going to make this choice in social media. That's why we're going to not do this piece of content, or that's what, any decision you're making is somewhat relative to this dream that you've posted. And what's interesting too is, like, yes, I mean, if you leave Sydney or leave LA Harbor and you're even a degree off course, you're going to miss Sydney by, I think it's like 200 or 300 miles, right? And so the point is when you're leaving that harbor, you're never going to have that level of precision, right? And a lot of brands will stagnate and go, we can't do anything until we've got everything figured out, every identity thing, and it's like, no, you got to get momentum out of the harbor. You got to know where you're going, right? You can always course correct. You're going to have new people. You're going to lose people. You've got to have a shared vision of where you're going, and really start to paint that picture. And so that, to answer your earlier question, is like, that's what we obsess on at Sorel, is creating this dream that feels so big and impossible and wonderful, and going, and every single day going, how are we starting to make decisions? And it's not going to be perfect. I can go on our website right now and find a vast majority of our current brand expression not getting me to Sydney, Australia, right? But it's coming. And the team can see it and taste it, and we're working on the things that will get us there. And that's where you start. And then, you know what I mean? And it makes it easy season over season to go, hey, cool. I get that someone in the design team had this cool idea for a merch story based on, actually, this just happened, based on baseball. Okay, great idea. How's it get us where we said we wanted to go? Reshape the idea, because that isn't it. You know what I mean? And so that's the kind of discussions we have every day. And it just makes it so much easier, because it's not about Michael's opinion. It's not about Cole's opinion. It's us having collectively gone, no, remember, that's where we're going. And sorry for the rant. But
So the rebrand launches this fall.
yeah.
Um, what's the minimum percentage of people, like collective people out there, that you want to feel agitated and frustrated by this new brand launch? How many people do you want to support it? How many people do you want to be critical of it? Like, what's the right ratio for you?
Well, I
Because
mean,
everyone says,
I want 100% people to love it.
but you can't
Of
say
course not.
you can't say that I want people to dislike it, because that creates edge, that creates something to be sharp, and then have everyone love it. I guess theoretically maybe it's possible,
You're
but I don't
saying
know.
that polarization
Yeah,
fallout
if
is inevitable for something worth doing, right?
yes,
Yeah.
that's a much better way of saying it than I just tried to say it.
Yeah, I don't know what that ratio is. Obviously, you want it. I um let's put it this way, of the people that will ultimately influence and shape the trickle down of culture to the wider audience, that even if they hate it, might love it in 6 months. I want the people, I want my core constituency of target consumers, I want that ratio to be high in my favor. Um, and the irony is that those people that are actually shaping decisions embrace polarity and embrace the controversial and embrace the newness and the freshness, and as almost a default setting, and so that's a case to be made for doing decisive things, is because the very people that shape and influence the broader culture find middling an offense. And so that's the strategic case to be made for it, is to say, I get that this might be risky holistically, but it's actually not risky in winning the people that I need to win.
So
Yeah.
there's this study that came out, and I did a solo episode on this, and Chris and I talked about this in the episode you've
Okay.
been referencing. Um, the King's Lion organization put out a study that was talking about the appetite for creative risk
Mm,
amongst creative departments, and it was
mm,
something like 13% of brands would say that their brands are willing to take creative risks.
right.
Chris had a really interesting anecdote about the creative risk being creative is risky,
Mm,
so the word
yeah.
creative risk is actually a terrible label to put on it.
Yeah.
Um,
I
but
like
I thought
that.
that 13% was a really intriguing takeaway from that study. And you're talking about this idea of middleness, and then we're talking about the idea of risk taking.
Mm.
13% doesn't make it sound like there's a lot of brands that are willing to actually take risks out
There's
there.
not, especially in the private equity world. I mean, so many brands now are owned by companies whose their entire existence is on risk mitigation. Like their highest ideal is to take risk out of things. So that's their these are why would you expect them to support bold creative visions? It just goes against everything in their worldview. Um,
Yeah.
and that's a business model. I mean, look what's happened to the surfing industry. I mean, it's you think you're going to see anything exciting and risk taking come out of surf anytime soon? And the whole industry has sold itself to private equity. And so, I mean, you think about Michael Thompson's work with Gotcha in the 80s and 90s, and it was, I mean, crazy and bold and exciting and daring, and it's like there's not a chance. There's not a chance that's coming out of a brand owned by Authentic Brands Group or so, it's just not their business model. It's just not how it's going to work. Uh,
Hmm.
so
Something you talked about on our intro call was this idea of instinct versus insight,
mm,
or insight versus instinct. Tell me more
right.
about that, and how does it relate to what we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think another thing that happens, and this is across all organizations, is we live in a world where there's tremendous amount of data at our fingertips. There's tremendous amount of insight. There's from political campaigns to ad campaigns, right? Is that we have the luxury of making fact-based decisions, and that's an incredible tool, an incredible asset, and it's an incredible addiction. And it's like everything in life, there's sort of too much good can become a bad, right? And so what you have is organizations where it's like, well, we can't do that unless we have the insight that makes sure that's going to work. And what's the problem with that? I mean, I go back to that Beatles analogy is, you know, there was no insight that told you Sergeant Pepper's was going to work, right? They just knew. They just made it. They made something truly special. As Rick Rubin would say, the audience came last. This wasn't about pleasing an audience. It was about pleasing themselves, right? And the balance is what's so key because unless you have, you know, crazy batting 1,000 talented people in your organization, you're going to have to create that balancing act where you let the people that have those skills run a bit amok and do some things and take some risks and create some magic. But you also have to offset that and eat your vegetables and do those performance ads and do so I think the new marketing model is finding that balance. And also, we have to report up to bosses and shareholders and if it's all risk all the time, unless you're Paul McCartney and John Lennon, that's a tough road. Uh,
So, so
yeah.
when you say insight, are you talking about? You sound like you're talking about insights derived from data. You're not necessarily talking about emotionally
Well,
human-led
both even. I'll
insights.
give you an example. So I go back to that brand that I was fortunate to be a part of, Sanuk, and we had a 10-year run where we were just the founder, Jeff Kelly, and myself, just like, he'd call me every day and go, "Hey, what if we did this?" And it was just completely instinct driven. And we were winning off instincts. It was a magical time, and we just had hit this sort of zeitgeist and had this thing going. And then when we were purchased by Deckers, a massive corporation, we they brought in, and these are great people with, I learned a ton from them, but we brought, suddenly we have the insights team, and we have now we're testing every ad, and we're bringing in focus groups to see how they really feel when they step in our shoes, and we're flying all over the country and doing focus groups on, whether that humor pushed it too hard, or whether women found it funny, or what, and in overnight, almost overnight, the brand, based on insight. Now you can frame it culturally or data. There was it was a spectrum of insights. I'm not picking just one lane, and the insights killed the instincts, and the brand found itself middling and basic and boring and bad, and it hasn't stopped since. And it's because trusting people to come in and go, hey, I want to make an ad where our top surfer looks like Moses parting the Red Sea. Guess what? Not a lot of appetite for that, you know? And yet that's what we did before.
Okay, I want to press deeper on that to better
Yeah.
understand. So you're saying that there's a golden period where instinct was just like you guys were in tune, everything
Hmm.
was, you're coming up with great ideas and it was working.
Yeah.
Is that though because you had a great understanding and a great insight about your audience and your customer to then infer your instincts off of? Or
Probably a implicit one. I mean,
so
a brand that I find interesting right now that I think is kind of threading this needle quite well is the hat company Melon. So and I've chatted with folks over there a few times, but they are an extremely data driven, insight driven organization. They're highly effective on how they look at their performance marketing, but they also really have a layer of instinct on it, where particularly driven by their passionate founder. That's often the case, where there's a, hey, this is right for us, this is wrong for us, sixth sense, right? And that's what you want. You want that balance. It's
yeah,
just tough. It's
I'm
tough to
just thinking
find.
about like what is the minimum level of insight you need in order to develop instinct, and when do you go too far?
I don't know. I think,
You
what
like how I
I
keep trying to like put you in a box and want you to
well,
quantify everything?
I'll look at it this way, because I've spent my life as a fish out of water. I grew up overseas. I grew up in a very, quite lonely situation, growing up in a remote jungle tribe in Papua New Guinea, where, really it was my sister was my friend. And, I lived in I didn't grow up as part of a skateboarding culture. I didn't grow up in punk rock. I didn't grow up as part of the outdoor culture. And so part of the reason I've loved this career is that I'm forced to have the humility of an outsider and to be an anthropologist. So I had the distinct privilege of working with surfers, with working with rock climbers, with working with skateboarders. That's a really interesting and fun one, where you have to go in and ask questions and be curious and just be willing to be the kook and be willing to be the person that doesn't actually know. And so it takes a while to have good instincts. So if I look at my time at DC Shoes, when I started there, I remember sitting down with skateboarders, and they were probably thinking, man, we are screwed. How is this guy going to run our brand? I mean, he's never set foot on a skateboard. And, but it takes time, and it takes questions, and it takes, and by the end of my tenure there, like, I would say my instincts got so much sharper, and it just, some of that just takes time. And, if I had just gone in with a sledgehammer swinging because I have good instincts, I would have been screwed. And so I don't know if that makes sense, but it just takes a little
Yeah.
time. Um, but
I I read this not too long ago. Sometimes the best experts are the ones who ask the best questions.
yeah, the non-expert. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a beautiful thing. It's funny because I often think about, there's topics and things in my life that I'm actually passionate about and maybe have a little more expertise on. And the irony is I've never worked on those in my career. And I often wonder, like, would I have been better or worse if I had had the luxury of working in something I actually find that I've actually, I'm curious. I mean, if, it's an interesting thing to speculate on. Anyway,
I've wondered that too. I've
yeah,
wondered, would I be better off if my passion for filmmaking and content wasn't my profession?
right.
Because sometimes it is a joy and it's an absolute, like it's a gift.
Yeah.
Other times it's an absolute curse.
Right,
Um,
right, right. Well, that's like Chris was saying. He was saying, it's become a tool, not a paintbrush.
right.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Let's talk about brand and performance.
Yep.
And sometimes people describe them as a pendulum. Performance is on one side, brand is on the other. And over time, this pendulum swings,
Mm.
and either it's all performance or it's all brand or some mix of the both. Um, I don't know if I really like that visual because it assumes that brand and performance have to be competing with each other, which
Right.
is simply not true. Um, how are you seeing brand and performance working really well together?
I think I couldn't agree more. I think if you're saying we can't do good creative because it has to perform, well, then you've lost sight of what good creative is. Like the mediums are going to change. I mean, that's, can it, I can't, yeah, I don't know what the analogies. I mean, the like, yes, there's things yes, there are things you wouldn't do even if you knew they'd perform. The analogy I always give is if we're just looking for clicks or likes, well, we'd just pump out pornography or puppy dogs, right? Because, but so clearly there are some limitations on where you don't just succumb to performance for performance sake. You're going to have brand integrity, but the best stuff in the sweet spot is when you're able to prove that something that is on brand and is elevating actually outperforms. And that's for me creatively, there's no sweeter "I told you so," or than being able to do that in an organization where there's pressure to middle something. And when you can and sometimes you lose and you have to eat a little crow. But when you can do something that's elevated and it works better, oh man, the whole watch people's faith change. And that's the bet we're about to do at Sorel is we have developed out some creative that's risk taking and that is I feel passionate about, and it's art. It's beautiful. And I need it to perform because but I really do believe it will. But I need it to outperform the cringy, influencer content or the, whatever else that the brand may have built some addictions to.
Yeah, tell me more about how are you hedging your bets? What sort of process, what sort of approach are you taking to try and ensure that that creative works?
Um, the way is instead of having an either or, is to try to in a creative engine that can trickle down and be modular and flexible. So where you have the alpha creative units, the whether it's the short film, the 30-second spot that you're so proud of, whether it's there's a handful of things that are the catalytic pieces where you compromise zero. But doing those in a way, creating those in a way where they are innately modular, whether it's on a video level, a photography level, a copywriting level, where you can still, okay, you go, okay, I've got my master pizza, or I'm trying to think of what a good analogy would be, this meal, right? But if push comes to shove, I know I can take that pepperoni off and make it perform as an isolated unit or as a cut down or a more targeted piece for a specific audience. And so that's how you're hedging your bet versus saying, um, but it's all still of the brand. It's all still Italian food in this analogy, right? As opposed to saying, well, we're going to make this pizza we're proud of, but just in case we've got some chow mein in the back. No, that isn't how to do it, right? And so the point is to get off the thing that's not on brand for your restaurant in this analogy, right? And so if I look at, say, cringy influencer content, that's that's not going to be my alternative. My alternative is going to be how am I addressing the what that was fulfilling for the brand, but in a way that now aligns with the restaurant and the cuisine we've decided to cook. And it just takes some time, and you might lose a bit. You may have to uh, absorb a little pain, and financially or culturally with your team until you get that mojo. And again, that momentum out of the harbor because we said we're going to Sydney, right? And it takes a thick skin and a stubbornness and a conviction, an infectious conviction, to where people keep believing that Sydney is worth trying to get to.
And that it exists.
Yeah, we might be in a rowboat for a stretch of it, but don't hop in that speedboat that's heading to Alaska. That's not the spot. So,
So you're talking about one way to mitigate the risk is obviously by building out your content,
yep.
having more than just the hero piece. Um, that makes a lot of sense. It's a pretty common practice. As far as the creative itself and the concept that's driving the creative, how are you thinking that through and ensuring that that in itself will hopefully be a slam dunk?
Great question. I think I think like I wish I could just show you some of what we got cooking. I can kind of speak to it. We've made the decisive choice to really tap into some timeless archetypes and emotions and things that I think defy cultural moment or defy trend. And we've also, if I look to the outdoor industry to our left and I look to fashion to our right, what we've tried to do is develop creative that differentiates in both directions, but that there is this sort of Venn diagram overlap that also gives us kind of permission both ways. So, relative to our outdoor peers, this will feel far more romantic and ethereal and beautiful and artistic and abstract than the literal world that they exist in that we were just talking about. And to the fashion brands to our right, it'll feel far more rooted in heritage and in um, an authenticity of spirit than maybe they play in. And so we're trying to own this really unique juxtaposition. And so I don't know if it'll work. But my career was built off I don't know if it'll work. So I don't know. We'll see. Uh,
There's a there's a there's an interesting relationship that the outdoor industry has when core outdoor brands turn and do collaborations with
mm,
fashion.
mm,
Um, obviously, Sorel, people probably wouldn't put Sorel in the same category as a core outdoor brand
right,
like the North Face.
right.
But that campaign the North Face did with gosh,
Skims.
Skims,
Yeah,
yeah, like that created some friction. Some
sure.
people weren't stoked about that. Now, if polarizing is part of the goal, then maybe that was success. Um, how concerned are you about outdoor accepting quote unquote Sorel with this new blend of fashion and outdoor?
Zero. The That's the beauty of Sorel is I don't have, I spend a lot of time in surfing and skateboarding where if you lose your core constituency, you make that even that one step out, you step out of line once with skateboarders, they'll never forgive you, right? You have to keep your base on board. You have to make decisions that are not an affront to them. Sorel doesn't have, okay, maybe there's a hand, we don't have that type of restriction or constraint. And it's quite liberating actually. I mean, I don't get me wrong, I love the beauty of subculture and the truth and the of a core constituency and the passion that comes with that. But it's also man, for a marketer, it can be a real constraint. And so, like, I referenced the Ralph Lauren example earlier. The polo players of the world don't turn their backs on Ralph Lauren when he starts making cowboy hats, right? Because it's a different beast. And I think Sorel, the best analogy I can give is the Land Rover brand. There are people that have owned Defenders from the 60s and they're hardcore Land Rover purists, but they're not going to give up their Land Rover because they saw Victoria Beckham driving a brand new Evoque through London, right? So it's that's a bit more like the Sorel analogy. I don't think we have that hardcore rock climber type of constituency that would that I mean that genie left the bottle long ago with Sorel. I mean, so I don't know if that answers the question, but
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Do you think the outdoor industry could be more forgiving when outdoor brands try and step outside of the traditions and do something different? Are they overly critical when TNF does a collaboration with Skims, or is there merit to that?
I don't know. I think the criticism's part of the energy, right? It's part of the I mean, I'm fairly confident whatever your opinion or my opinion would be on that, the North Face, willfully stepped into that debate and created buzz and stir and probably lost some fans and won some fans, but net did something now I can make an argument both ways with that one, for sure. But I guess I don't know. I don't I mean, you can stay pure and stay small. So it's really what your goals are. What's Sydney look like for you? I'm not built for that playbook. I'm not built for the let's sell fishing gear at Costco playbook. I really am not like hating on that. That's if you can make billions of dollars doing that, have at it, man. Um, I'm built for the like I like the Richard Branson playbook of going, wow, how do I have a brand that is so distinct that I can put it on record company, chocolate bars, and airline because I have this personality that can map onto everything. That's the dream with Sorel is to go, man, obviously we're not going to do this anytime soon, but I want to dream about what a Sorel restaurant would be. I want to dream about what a Sorel hotel experience would be. I wanted, that's when you get the good stuff. Anyway.
How are you investing so much into the top of the funnel without destabilizing day-to-day performance of the company?
Well, we looked at the day-to-day spends, as you put it, and right away we're able to identify things that were massive expenditures, but that were just carryover. Well, that's what we've always done. The results weren't even there. Like that's the easy cuts. And you're going, cool. I get that we've always done end caps at this massive retailer. Our sales have gone down. So don't tell me the end caps are a great spend, right? Right away, I'm taking that money, right? And yes, it makes it painful for the sales rep who has to go break it to the account, who counts on that money for those end caps. It's almost a revenue thing for them, really. Um, and and uh, and that's an awkward conversation. There's relationship currency, and I care about that. But the conversation has to be, look, we're going to make this brand hot again. We're going to spend money, and you might not feel it season one, but you're going to feel this. Trust us. That's why I said we spent a year selling this dream, turning atheists into believers, because I don't want to have to debate about the end caps. I want to create undeniable heat and hey, we'll revisit that in a few years. And so it's been a lot of that. But where it's trickier is more on the direct to consumer, put $1 in, get $2 out ATM machine that is performance. And that's where, we've been much more cautious to go, hey, let's make sure we're not stupidly turning off a revenue valve that needs to stay on. And just figuring out that balance. If you know, but ultimately, also looking at costs with traditional agency models and looking at things where we're going, I get it. I get that we've been with that PR agency for 17 years, that has ballooned in investment, not in results. We're going to take a look at that. And that's a big part of the exercise.
Yeah. You mentioned relationship currency.
Mm.
Tell me more about emotional currency with your audience. How do you think about that? Is that important? Is that a key piece of this rebrand?
Oh, I think it's the whole thing. I think I don't, I think that's and it's cliche. I mean, this isn't new news, but even Burkhardt was talking about it on his pod. Is I mean, the how you make people feel is so much more important than anything else you can do. I mean, that's why religion works. That's why political movements work, right? It's why timeless. It's why hip hop didn't start on a PowerPoint slide. It made people feel a way, right? It's it's and so that's what it's all about. Is going, how are we going to make you feel? And so like our whole campaign that we're about to launch based on a poem I wrote flying to Portland one day. And my point isn't to make it sound silly or trivial. My point is to say the goal is emotive. The goal is to where we want to sweep people away to feel to feel like Sorel is a brand that helps them live boldly and live, and where nature is not something to be conquered. It is an art moment. It is to be, you know, drank in. It is, it is Tom Hardy in the woods reading Shakespeare, right? It is there. That's the feeling I want is that sense of grandeur, um, mixed with a bit of grit, but not, that's what we want to sweep people away to. And yeah, so
Tom Hardy reading Shakespeare in the Woods. That's the new direction for Sorel, huh?
bingo.
I can see it now. Something that I talk about a lot, or that we've recently been talking about as our company has been going through a rebrand, is this
Okay.
idea that the audience doesn't care. They don't care about your content. They don't care
Right.
about your brand inherently. And one of the ways to make them care is to give them some form of feeling,
Mm,
however you deliver that, whether it's through a short film, educational series, like just something funny on Instagram.
yeah.
Like feeling is such a powerful tool,
Mm,
but it gets so nebulous because it gets classified as one of those, well, we can't measure it, therefore it's hard to spend,
sure.
therefore it's hard to invest. Um, but I would argue it's like table stakes these days when everyone is the same. Coming back to this idea of homogenization amongst brands and content.
How do you mean though? There's what do you mean they're all the same when it comes to feeling?
Well, I'm talking about like if you were to survey, so let's say you polled an audience, they
Mm,
all watched 10 short films from 10 different brands.
mm,
How many of those audience members would actually feel something from watching that piece of content? I would speculate and say it's a fairly low amount
totally.
that actually have a deep visceral connection.
Right.
Because feeling is hard. It's hard to craft. It's hard to present. It's
Right.
hard to manufacture.
Sure.
That's what I mean.
But there's layers of the feeling, right? So if I look at a feeling of inspiration or a feeling of humor or a feeling of there's a spectrum of things that a brand based on its personality might cause people to feel. But
Sure.
ultimately those feelings have to layer back to something more primeval or carnal, or I don't know what the word I'm looking for is here. And those have to do with vanity, fear. There's a handful of things that are the things that actually make you make a decision. So if I speak about a brand like Sorel, the feel when I talk about, oh, I want them to feel swept away, I want them to feel all these things. That's the icing layer. The less sexy or almost more manipulative layer, which sounds terrible to say, but that's what we're in the business of, is the feeling of vanity in Sorel's case. I want them to feel like, well, if I get that, then I've got the right thing, right? And there's different vanity triggers we're pulling on. And that's whereas a true core outdoor brand might make someone feel a certain way, but ultimately wants to pull them into and this is where brands like North Face might flex toward vanity, right? Oh, I've got a North Face jacket on, right? But a lot of the real core outdoor brands are more flexing toward not, and I don't mean this in a negative way, it might be fear, like, oh, I won't survive on that rock if I don't have these ropes, or I won't, um, like it's a much more base feeling that
Yeah.
I need that one. I can't, how could I possibly trust these other ropes or whatever, you know what I mean? And so it's not because, you know, people want and maybe I've lost touch with the climbing world. It's not because someone wants the vanity of the designer ropes. Whereas in this current world, I mean, that is a factor, right? Is I'm trying to the person driving that Land Rover whether they want to admit it or not, is far more motivated by vanity than they are by a technical trust or all the things the brand would market itself on. So there's two layers of the emotion. One is to go, oh, I want you to be inspired by our heritage and the outdoors. But the real lever I'm pulling is you're going to look damn good in this when you pull up to soccer practice in your new Range Rover Sport. You know what I mean? And that's a different thing. Yeah.
So vanity is one of those kind of sub-tier emotional
Hun-
levers. What are other ones that you're pulling?
Come well, well, for Sorel,
Yeah,
trust,
for Sorel.
trust. I mean, when you buy our boots, they don't break down. They last generations. There's a deep trust there, and those that often goes hand in hand with luxury and with quality and craftsmanship. I mean, an Hermes Birkin bag is, you know, hand stitched by master craftsmen, and it's an incredible process. But so you have quality and vanity, running on parallel paths. In the greater world, I see though, I think of comfort, and I think of the warm hug of a shearling boot. I think of, the of that perfect puffer jacket in the outdoor world, or what have you, where there's things that are ease. Ease is a big one. People, and look how many brands were built on ease, of going, God, I mean, that, Sanuk was built on that, of going, I want to be the easiest thing. We're not using, we're not going to talk about traction. We're not going to talk about waterproofing. We're not talking about any of that. But these take 0.0001 seconds to put on, and you don't have to think, and you could be drunk or stoned. Like, so that's a whole different lane. But anyway, it's just kind of distilling that essence down, and being honest about it with your brand. And going, look, like I went through this with Sanuk all the time, with people, especially in Europe. Well, tell me about the compression rate of your EVA. It's like, dude, this is you lost the plot here. This is not that. this is a different thing. And so you got to know what your brand essence is.
I asked Chris a similar question, and I'm curious to hear your evaluation. So if you had to evaluate the outdoor industry
Mm,
for its ability to conjure emotion, to share emotion with its audience, how is the industry doing in terms of that metric?
I'd say terrible overall. I mean, if I line up. I mean, you can almost take logos off ads, and it's all this. I mean, it's just. I mean, it's it's funny because it's such a great opportunity to be disruptive. It's such a gold mine creatively. But it's the outdoor brands are also. I mean, you talk about brands that have a lot of, bureaucracy and tradition and fear, and I mean, they're you you see some of the brands that are making noise in the outdoors, and they're almost all coming at it from an outsider shake-up perspective. Yeah, it's a very boring industry, in my opinion. Um,
Okay, well, that makes you, me, and Chris, we all agree, so that
yeah.
means something.
I remember I used to walk through the outdoor retailer show, and just sort of in my mind's eye picture that logos were taken off of booths and stuff, and just
Sure.
go, "Oh, yeah, okay."
Well, I think that metric is a really great metric to aim for. If you can remove the logo from something and someone can still identify
Right.
your piece of creative as your creative, like, you're doing something right. Um,
Totally.
I but that's hard to do.
It's so hard to do. It takes conviction and discipline, though, but sometimes it's simplicity. I just gave a presentation to our entire team at Sorel, and I went through a bunch of examples where, without showing, so, like first I showed a slide of logos where you couldn't see, you just saw the shape and everyone knew it, right? It was like, oh, well, a logo must be your brand, right? Well, no. Then I showed a collage of Calvin Klein photography for the last 30 years, but I photoshopped all the logos out. And I said, can you name this brand? And everyone was like, Calvin Klein.
Yeah.
Why? Because Calvin Klein has a disciplined visual language, right? And it's always those gray tones and the black and white and the six-pack abs on Marky Mark, or who, you know what I mean? Like, it's a very distinct world they've built. And then you go, okay, so it's visual language. Then you take a then you shift gears to a brand like, I'm trying to think of an example where you're all over the place visually, but it's like, but we know the wit, or we know the sense of humor. And so it can be all these, there's a lot of different threads you can pull on. And you have to decide as a brand which ones. So the outdoor industry has just not pulled very hard on the visual differentiation thread. That said, they might say, well, Patagonia's the eco guys, or North Face is the styly guys, or there's other threads they've pulled on. But I would argue, when it comes to visuals and emotion, they haven't pulled very differently.
people talk about this,
Yeah.
right? The idea that your logo isn't a brand.
Mm.
And I'm honestly still surprised that we're talking about this. Like, aren't we past that point? Don't
Sure.
people know
Yeah,
that
I
a
think
logo
so.
isn't? But this pops up on. I see this on LinkedIn all the time. People are talking about it's like this new profound idea, like, oh, your logo isn't your brand. Is that just because we're
Well,
in it and we know it,
well,
or
for some
does
brands, maybe it is though, and for because they've just achieved a certain scale and ubiquity that it's more of a label. When you have an organization of people, you know, accounting, sales, all different folks, sometimes there's a need for that kind of education because they're wondering, wait, why is the marketing department doing X, Y, or Z? And I want the, I want them to understand why it's more than a logo. And so that's the need for it. It's yes, we're past it, but your whole organization might not be past it.
sure,
And that's okay.
sure.
I don't understand accounting. So
I frequently need people to remind me about
yeah.
all the intricacies of accounting and how you balance things.
Right.
Um, okay, one of the last things I want to talk about before we start to wrap up here. Again, in our intro call, you talked about the distinction between cotton candy contents versus real nutritional
Mm.
content. What do you mean by that? I think that's a really interesting way to describe what I'm assuming you're talking about.
I get that it works for some brands, and I have to, it's funny because I'm contradicting myself where I say, hey, you got to do what's right for your brand, regardless of your personal convictions and what your taste or whatever. You got to be a servant of the position you've aligned on. That said, I'm also kind of full of shit here because I do have a personal aversion that infects my thinking. I happen to be at a brand where I can defend this strategically. Um, Aversion to cotton can't, I don't, the sort of, the stuff you see on Instagram or TikTok or certainly the kind of nonsensical influencer stuff that is just, it's, I mean, calling it cotton candy is probably being generous. Where it's just the least common denominator creativity. It is just soulless. It is so just just kills me. It is bad art. It is and I think even on the internal stuff where it's like, oh, we're gonna do the video of our favorite dogs at the office or whatever. I just stop. No one wants to see the dogs at the office. And maybe that's I'm being really unfair. Maybe that works for some brands and stuff, and I see it all the time. Um,
That's only every agency out there.
right, right. And and so yeah. Uh, but
So,
that
what if you had to wrap that concept into a thesis? Like, what are you saying? Only go after the real nutritional content and get rid of the cotton candy?
yes, that's what I'm saying. I saw this funny, I forget his name, the guy on Instagram who does the subway takes. Um, but this woman got on and she said, I think you should have to, her hot take was you should have to have a degree to be a DJ. And I loved that comment because her point was there was a time where to create music, you had to have put in the work to have learned the guitar and Matt, and you're putting, you have earned the right to be a creator by the painstaking process of proving that you have a talent in hand and a passion that is worth hearing out, right? And then through technology, you suddenly every kid's a DJ, right? And not to say there aren't talented DJs, but the point is we made the music, the creativity of music so easily accessible that it got really dumbed down. And I think the same thing's true of content and advertising is we made it so accessible where every 18-year-old with a camera is a creative director. And not to say there aren't brilliant talented ones out there that'll kick my ass every day, but 99% of them terrible. And like and that's the cotton candy I'm talking about. It's yeah.
Yeah, we've shortcutted the system so you don't have to put in the 10,000 hours to become an expert.
Exactly. Try 10 hours they aren't putting in. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I love that you referenced that. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a great book about about not that, but about the 10,000
Yeah.
hours towards working towards mastery by Malcolm
Yeah.
Gladwell called Outliers.
Totally.
Have you read that?
Oh, I've read it 6 times.
Okay. I'm listening to it now and it's top of mind for me.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
What I his
Um,
his underrated book, in my opinion, is David and Goliath. And I wish more
okay, I
brands.
listened to his
Yeah.
TED talk on that one. That's good.
It's a way that brands need to think, and I see that happen a lot, is we're looking we look a lot to the Goliaths, and instead of going, "Hey, what's the armor we need to put on based on our internal skills, based on our," it's funny, you referenced humor a few times. And humor is a particularly interesting one. Like being pretentious, being high fashion is actually pretty damn easy. There's a lot of people that masquerade as brilliant creatives in fashion because it's not that hard, right? Humor is hard, and so when you have a brand that wants to be funny, if you don't have people inside your building that are funny, don't do it. The point is, don't put on the armor. Don't put on Goliath's armor if you're David. Use your slingshot. And if you're not, be honest with yourself. If you're not a funny organization, don't make that your position. If you're and you have to, these are some things where you have to be honest. And that's one of the things that Sorel I think about is going, look, I know I want to get to Sydney using that analogy. I know what we want to be, but I have to do an honest assessment of the idiosyncrasies, the talent, the culture of what I'm working with to go, oh, what are the levers I can and should pull? And what are the ones I'm not even going to waste time on because the time to become a Goliath in that it's not realistic. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's
Yeah.
I gotta come in and go, what are the tools and resources and skills that I can double down on instead of trying to force fit something that isn't even there. Um,
Right. Yeah. How do you leverage your strengths to create something that's distinct, but without stepping outside the lines too much into a realm that's not
totally.
even possible
I've
for
I've
you?
had the luxury of having really great mentors and bosses in my career. With one exception, I had this just absolutely terrible boss. And one of his obsessions was organizationally was just constantly what people needed to work on. So doing these evaluations of your skills, oh, you need to work on this. Like, so in my case, I'm not a numbers guy, I'm not a math guy, I'm a creative first. And it was like, oh, we need to work on your budget skills or different things. I'm just, it's like, man, you missed the plot. Triple down on the things that people are good at. Like, I'm not saying overlook, bad behavior or something. I'm saying when I look at my team, I don't look at each person as a Swiss Army knife and go, "Hey, what's the smallest tool in their Swiss Army knife?" I'm going, "What's the big blade? What's the thing? Oh, they have a big corkscrew. I'm going to use that." I want to triple down on the places people over index and have great skills. And I mean, that's what sports does. You don't turn a point guard into a center just because that's not what he's you know what I mean? Like, but in business, for
Yeah.
some reason, that's this thing. And I just think people get that all wrong. So anyways, man, I'm gonna shut up now.
Michael, if you had to summarize our conversation, if you had to give some practical applications and next steps for folks who are listening, who are like, yeah, this guy's onto something. Now, what do I do with all this information? If you could do your best to kind of distill this into specific takeaways, what might you
Well,
share?
give me who am I speaking to? Like someone trying to decide how to go into their career, a leader?
Let's say you're speaking to folks on the brand side who want to shake things up, who are
Mhm.
like, okay, we need to do something different. Let's say so that's one, and then your second is a creative director at a brand who's like, we need to make something fresh, something interesting. Those are your two audiences.
Yeah. Well, I'll steal a line that I think that someone told me once, a mentor in my life, and I think he stole it. But he said to me, he said, "Michael, culture eats strategy for breakfast." And I truly believe that's the biggest thing people need to realize is to go, look, if you're trying to get your team, your brand to the next level and to whether it's going, hey, we want to be more risk taking in our creative or whatever it is, you first have to look and go, do I have a culture? Do I have a culture that can sustain that? Do I have people that like you can't just show up in Italy and tell them to be German, right? You have, if you want to be a more rigorous and disciplined culture, no, you got to hire Germans or whatever, right? My point is, going, hey, if you want your brand and the creative engine or the marketing engine to have a certain persuasion, build the team and the culture that reflects that. And culture has to be innate. It's a mixture of the individuals you bring in. It's not a laminated card you put on their desk, which by the way really happened in my life once, where it was like, from now on we're going to be innovative, and you're like, yeah, but what if we don't have innovative people? Like, you've got to build the culture that you want to do that. So if you want, in the example you're giving, if you want to take more risks as a brand and you believe that's a strategic imperative, and you want to have more creative and out of the box thinking, go find the people. Don't hire the critic. Don't hire the studio musician. Go find your John Lennon. Go find them. It's worth it. Go find the people, if that's what you want to do. If you want to be a brand that's really good at emulating and really, then go hire those people. Both plans can have tremendous success. I'm just biased for one.
Incredible. Michael, well, you've shared some awesome insights, some awesome behind the scenes. I think everyone is probably by now quite excited to see what Sorel is rolling out. I suppose you've kind of got the luxury, maybe it's a luxury, of being able to talk about brand building without actually revealing what you have working. I guess we'll find out once things come out, and I'm excited for you. Where can folks follow along with you? Where can they see the launch when it all comes out?
Well, so our no shocking places here. Our website, our Instagram, all the usual social outlets. We have a few kind of unexpected, I think, tricks up our sleeve. We have some really exciting energy partnerships on deck. Yeah, just stay tuned.
Incredible. Well, Michael, I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for the thoughts, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, man. That was great. Appreciate you.
See ya.
All right.